Everyone, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of the Village of Key Biscayne and this project team, we thank you so much for coming to this public workshop. This gives you an opportunity to take a look at some of the work we've done so far in the design phase and also address some very important questions that are pressing on the minds of many of the residents. My name is Michelle Simmons. I serve as the Public Information Specialist assisting the city. So you may have an opportunity to share some of your comments with me at some point, but if not, we do have other members of staff who can help you with those. So at this time, I'd like to introduce the village manager, which is Mr. John Gilbert.
First of all, good evening. Second, real quick, how many people were at the first workshop that we had about 16, 17 months ago? All right. There'll be a small segment of the presentation this evening that will bring us current. And then as we promised at that workshop, this is in addition to, we talked at that first workshop about how necessary it was to get a true evaluation of our needs here on the Key. I think you'll see that we've done an excellent job on doing that this evening, and we'll also start laying out some of the programming that we have decided to move forward with. I think that some of the emergency repairs that have occurred already have made a difference, maybe not significant, but a difference. But I think that in the big picture, this is just the beginning of some stepping stones moving forward. So thank you for being here this evening. I think you'll find it just as informational as it was the last time. Enough staff is here to answer any questions you may have during the presentations, and of course we'll always be able to answer questions afterward. Okay, my pleasure, my honor to introduce our mayor, Myra Lindsay. She's been a strong supporter. We got this through our local government to get the funding necessary to begin these projects through our mayor, and I would like to introduce her this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Stormwater Planning Workshop. This is the second of the series, and this is really illustrates our commitment, our ongoing commitment to infrastructure here on Key Biscayne. We are concerned about the systems that we have in place, about not only properly maintaining them, but being proactive and updating them before we reach a critical need. We have learned from other communities that this is a best practice. We've always been very responsible and very responsive to these needs. I want to welcome EAC aboard. They are our new consultants. They've done an exceptional job. They've been incredibly responsive. I invite everyone to look around and to learn from the presentation. They have done incredible inventories. They have their boots on the ground. They're identifying improvements and implementing them as we go. I also want to thank our staff who's here from Public Works. They are almost all here, and also our Building and Zoning Department, because without these folks, we can't get this done. They are local experts. They work on this daily, and it completely affects our quality of life and our ability to operate as a community and as a government. So again, thank you all for being here, and I want to reiterate our commitment to our infrastructure and to getting things done on Key Biscayne. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Tony Brown from the Public Works Department.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tony Brown, and I'm the Public Works Superintendent for the Village of Key Biscayne, and I just want to discuss briefly with you some ongoing maintenance that we're doing to our drainage system and the entire village stormwater infrastructure. Our network of catch basins are interconnected, and at some point they either drain into a well or they exit through outfalls that go into the bay within the village stormwater infrastructure. In addition to the catch basins, we have a maintenance program that involves well cleaning, which is very critical because a lot of the rainwater during high intense rains, it goes into the wells, and then as a overflow, it also goes into the outfall. And last year we cleaned 8 wells, which was completed June 10th, 2014. This past year, we cleaned 9 more wells, which were also completed, and we will continue to clean wells every year. And we also plan to deepen 2 wells, 3A and 3B, in the 2016 budget. In addition to well cleaning, we also reline drainage pipes that have corrosion, infiltration, or joint separation. These photos here these are pipe photos from the Ocean Lane Drive pipelining project. As you can see, the first photo there, let me see if I can get this pointer. Let me use this here. All right. This here is a pipe on Ocean Lane Drive that had some corrosion, and right here there was also some water infiltration just from the groundwater. And when this happens, this kind of it fills up our wells in our pump stations, and it causes the pumps to come on prematurely to try to pump this type of water out. And this is like a false reading. You know, this is not really rainwater, this is groundwater. So on this photo, after we line the pipe now it's secure. That water infiltration there is no more. And I just want to pass out here what the pipe lining product is. It's a 3-part resin on a felt sheet. And what happens is the pipe lining contractor, they push that through with steam, and the steam activates the resin, and it hardens that felt into what you see there. And that there will last forever. It'll be here long after me, excuse me. And when that particular lining is put in, the existing external pipe can actually corrode and just disintegrate, and that lining will stay intact for hundreds of years. So this is just another maintenance that we are performing on all of our pipes. And our first priority this year will be to line all the outfalls, which are corrugated metal pipes. And since they're so close to the salt water, we know that there's going to be some corrosion, so we're going to line those first this year. After heavy rain events, inspections are performed to document flooding. The photos in this slide here represent, this is Sonesta Drive, and we've documented that there's water coming over from the adjacent property, which is Key Colony. And they are working with us to inspect their wells and to get them clean, because they must be able to maintain their water and not dump this water off into Sonesta Drive. We have pumps that are connected to drains here, and after 2 hours or so, it drains it down. But if we didn't have this water coming over, our pumps would not have to work so hard. So we are working with them to secure this wall and to stop this water from coming over by helping them discuss redeveloping their drains within their property limits. Other improvements consist of the installation of a SCADA system at all pump stations. SCADA stands for Supervisory Control and Data Acquisition. In the past, if our pumps were not operating properly, we would basically get a call from the police department and say, hey, there's a lot of flooding out here, something's wrong, and then I would have to wake up, drive over, and check the pumps. Now, this particular system will call me at 3 a.m., 2 a.m., whenever the pumps aren't working. And I think last week, 2 weeks ago, the wet well alarm had sounded because we had a lot of rain and it was high tides. And the pump called me, and my wife was like, who is this calling you this time of night? And it's a female voice, and it just said, you know, the wet well, the wet well level is high. Pump 1 is working fine, and pump 2 is working fine also. So I said, see, honey, it's just the pump station. It's calling you, you know? So, you know, I got a pass on that. So this is just a proactive approach to ensuring that, you know, we are on top of the drainage situation and the flooding that we have here in the village. That ends my short presentation, and I would like to introduce our stormwater owner's representative, engineer, Mr. Jose Lopez, who will be discussing the emergency projects that we have coming. Thank you.
Well, in February of 2014, we had our first workshop. And we discussed in there the plans and the things we were going to do. One of the objectives was to do the emergency things that we recognize as more critical, to do it right away and not wait for today, you know, and have a complete planning process. And that's what we are going to review in here. We had identified several projects. One is the Harbor Point outfall enlargement, which we have been in the process of negotiating an easement, so we haven't been able to do that work. But we have done the 260 Harbor Drive work. The outfall was relocated, redone. This was caused by, these outfalls have collapsed as a result of corrosion of the metal pipes. And when I mean collapse, I mean collapse. It's the whole thing, you know. I remember one of the owners of a property came and said, it's a hole like that you can put a small Volkswagen in it, and it was. I mean, it just that bad. But now we have a new line in 260 Harbor Drive, and we have a new line in 398 Harbor Drive. They all serve the same basin, and it's a basin that gets a lot of flooding at West Heather, which is one of the lowest spots in the village, around 300 West Heather. So this was completed. Both works were completed. In fact, the 398, we were able to get a grant for it, but so it's work that has been done. And the other emergency work that was completed was, this was done in the summer of this year, was improvements in the school area, the K-8 area. It's a lot of flooding has happened there, and because of the being not only a flooding issue, but a kids' safety issue, we wanted to have it in the emergency work, and this work has been completed. 2 new wells were added to the area, and a backflow preventer was also installed. The problem is not totally solved, but we already have done some work on it. And now the next presentation will be Mariana on the CRS updates.
Thank you, Jose. I'd like to start by defining what CRS is. It stands for Community Rating System. It's a voluntary program that the village chooses to participate. We must meet a series of requirements, and in doing so, it benefits the community by providing 15% discount on all flood insurance policies, commercial, residence, throughout the village. The other way. One of the requirements of CRS is to make you aware and remind you that we are in a repetitive flood area. Meaning we choose to live in a community with low elevations subject to flood. Drainage is subject to tides. I'm probably going to be the least liked person here today. The first step in avoiding flooding is staging water in the streets and swale. Flooding, defined for the purpose of this presentation, is to avoid water entering your residence and affecting your private property. When there's a high tide, simply the water has nowhere to go. We just gotta wait for the tide to change so water starts draining. Jose and Tony did a wonderful job in telling you all the projects that we have done. And again, I'm here to highlight that this will alleviate, mitigate when there's a rainfall event. But any significant surges or storms, it won't be helpful when that situation arises. That's why we are in a mandatory evacuation zone when a storm does arise. Protect your property. We live in a flood zone. Again, you are required to have insurance. Even if you rent, we promote the importance of acquiring insurance. Most importantly, protect yourself. Turn around, don't drown. I learned that 6 inches of water, of running water, is sufficient to make you fall. And 2 feet will take your vehicle, even an SUV. So the purpose of this slide is just to be informed, be aware. Following are just simple tips on how to protect your property. And I must also direct you to a link as a requirement of CRS where you could obtain some information on grants. These grants offered are mainly to demolish and build a higher home above base flood elevation. Told you I was not going to be the most liked person here today. Build responsibly by obtaining a permit. You're ensuring that you're meeting the code, and the work being done in your property will minimize any flooding. This last slide is the importance of our natural resources, to protect them. Our water, our dunes, our turtles. I chose these pictures because the dunes that we've been building for the past 10 years and maintaining as an ongoing project is the first line of defense in the coastal areas of our island. And that's a perfect example of what not to do to the dunes. With this, I conclude my presentation, and I leave you in good hands with Mike Adelphi. He is engineer with EAC, orchestrating this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariana. I'm Mike Adifi, like Mariana said. I'm with EAC Consulting. I'm privileged to be the project manager on this great initiative that the village is embarking on. Really excited, but we're also grateful for the opportunity that the village has given us and has entrusted in us as a consultant team to handle this project. Even though we're the consultants, I'll be remiss if I fail to mention the level of support and cooperation that we have received from the village, the leadership of the village, the mayor, the village manager, the stormwater representative, and all of public works staff. It's been very, very good. When you have a support team working with you on such initiatives, it makes things easy, makes life easy. So we're truly grateful at the opportunity, and you guys keep doing it. You're doing a great job for the village, and some of the great work you've been doing that hasn't been noticed will start to get noticed with some of these improvements that we're looking at. Like the mayor and the manager said, this is another step in the journey to start to effect the right infrastructure improvements village-wide. Improvements that would bring a better sense of livelihood for the village residents as well as stakeholders within the village. The purpose of this meeting is fourfold. There are four main items that we want to accomplish through this process. And like I said, this is one meeting in a number of meetings that would occur as we start and as we continue to implement the improvements, the locations that we've identified. The first thing is to update the residents and stakeholders on the things that have happened since the last meeting last year. And I think Tony and Jose did a good job with that. We also want to let you know about the regulatory thresholds. There's a lot of misconception about what flooding is or what staging is, and I think Mariana has said a lot about that. So I think that is very clear. And we'll talk about it more as we go through this presentation. We also want you to know about the plans. What is about to happen? We've talked about this. We've looked at the issues. We've planned. It's time to start to implement. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about some of the plans that we have and some of the things that are about to happen in the future. But the most important of all is that we want to hear from you. You live through this on a daily basis. This is your village. This is where you stay. This is where your livelihood is. You see it, you've witnessed it, you've experienced it. So we're going to be relying on a lot of the feedback that we get back from you because we think it's important. It's valuable to the process. This is the team. It's not EAC Consulting. It's the village, the residents, the leadership of the village, and us. We're going to work on this together, and we're going to successfully accomplish the goals that have been laid out by the leadership of the village. So we've looked at, there's no plan without a schedule. You know, we can come up with the best plans, the most elaborate plans and schemes, but there has to be a timing to it. And so we've looked at the available budget that you have, looked at the projects that are needed, and we've come up with a sensible plan over a time period that allows for these improvements that we've identified to be designed, to be permitted by the regulatory agencies, and to be constructed and put into service. And so this is what we have. We have a starting date on this. Even though we've been working prior to this, we started this snapshot of the schedule by illustrating today's meeting, and then some of the other milestones that we hope to accomplish through the process. And there are two tables. There's a phase 1 schedule, as well as a phase 2 schedule, which is where future funding will be needed. Like I said, there's some funding available right now. Now we're going to stretch the funding and accomplish as much as we can with that funding. But I know that the leadership of the village as well as the staff are looking at other alternatives and other options to bring in needed funding to get some of the other improvements implemented. I'm the leader of the team, but I'm surrounded by a great crop of professionals. I tell Jose when I come to the meetings that my guys have sent me to the meeting to say things to you, but a lot of guys are working behind the scene, and some of them are here today, and I want to recognize some of them, and they'll speak to you about some of the things that we've been looking at. First, I want to bring on Cesar Burgess. Cesar has been very much involved in the hydraulic analysis and modeling that has gone through this process, and he'll be able to share more insight on some of the things that we've done. Cesar.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for having me here. Cesar Borges, Lucis Corporation. My area of expertise is stormwater management and modeling and analyzing systems. to come up with a solution for the village. So basically, what we started out with was the village had a master plan that was created in 2011, where they created a model that's a mathematical model that represents the city systems, the area, something so that you can analyze what's happening in the real world, but in a computer model. Since 2011, the village has been actively maintaining their systems, inspecting their systems, improving on the data that's been collected that they have in-house. So our process was, okay, they have all this new data, let's go ahead and implement it into the model so we can get a more realistic representation of what's going on. So part of this process involved updating certain components within the model so that we can get what's actively out there, what's been verified by hand, by feet on the ground, and have that implemented into the model. In addition to that, we also incorporated some projects that the village has completed since the 2011 completion of the Stormwater Master Plan. That's a very important task because there's certain items that are not represented in the previous model because they've been actively implemented after the completion of the Stormwater Master Plan. So that's kind of like getting it up to date, getting our existing condition. In addition to that, we were looking at sea level rise because sea level rise is a very hot topic. The village is very susceptible to sea level rise. It's something that cannot be ignored. We have actively implemented that part of the components of what's affecting the village's stormwater management systems in our model, so that we can address future needs, not only today's needs but future needs of the village. So that we can, you don't want to ignore something that might be happening 10, 15 years down the road. You want to plan ahead. So sea level rise is one of those things, and they're projected up to about the year 2030. Now, with respect to our analysis, we looked at the overall staging of water on the village roadways and the green areas, so on and so forth. When you look at your model, you have the village has very low topographic elevations. What do I mean by that? The elevation of the roadway, the elevation of your grass, the adjacent areas, it's very low relative to the tide, where all these waters are outfalling to. That's a bad thing. Without that elevation, water tends to stack up and end up as flooding on your roadways. And in addition to that, that means that you just need that much more force to be able to push that water off the roadways, through the system, and out into the outfalls. When we look at when we do our analysis, the way we tiered it, and you'll see it on all these boards, we tiered it in half-foot increments. You'll see there's a 0 to 5, 5 to 1, 1 to 1.5, and everything above 1.5. Whenever you see red is bad. And you'll see that on those boards, and that's part of the analysis. That's identifying the lowest lying areas that are mostly susceptible to flooding. So like I mentioned, in wrapping this up as far as the hydraulic analysis, we looked at sea level rise. We looked at the outfalls and how the most recent data that we have on the outfalls, updating that into the model. The new infrastructure has been put in. The items have been verified. We incorporated all of that into the model, as well as in our analysis for future conditions, where we put in proposed stormwater infrastructure to help alleviate the problems that the village has with regards to flooding and staging. So part of that included the priority level 1 and priority level 2 stormwater infrastructure improvements that one of my colleagues will be discussing a little bit later. We have to look at those as if they're finalized, so that we can assess their effectiveness on dealing with the stormwater management issues that are present on the island. Now, in the media, as a matter of fact, recently, I don't know if you guys have heard that South Carolina had their 1,000-year event. It's a kind of a misnomer in a way. People get it confused. They say that's something that happens only once in 1,000 years. It's not really once in 1,000 years. It's more of a probability. It's saying it has a 0.001% chance of happening instead of a 1,000-year event. Like, for example, a 100-year event has a 1% chance of happening. A 10-year event has a 10% chance of happening. A 5-year event has a 20% chance of happening. It's all percentage based. Now, with respect to the area that we're in South Florida. It rains a lot. Our systems are taxed by the smallest rainfall event, but yet even a 5-year event, something that has a 20% probability of happening, you're talking about 8 inches of rain over a 72-hour period. That's a significant amount of rain. So how do we design our systems? Well, the way we design our systems are, we intentionally utilize swales, some of the roadway, the grassy areas to provide storage for stormwater so that the water doesn't go into your homes, which is the most important aspect, or the most important property that we have. You don't want it inside the home. It's okay if the grass gets flooded. It'll flood. It might flood for a day or if in an extreme event. But our intention is to when you have staging of water on these designed areas, that the water recedes in a short amount of time. So that's the way we design our system. We design them to have some storage on the roadway, storage within the system, utilizing outfalls, pump stations, and wells, and not affecting the homes. And having those staged waters, those flooded waters, receding in a short period of time, so that you guys can go back to your normal daily lives. And that's the intent of the stormwater management systems. And if you look at the slide over here, you'll see that that over here, you see where it has 172-hour storm. That's the peak elevation that we want those waters to stage on the common areas. We don't want it to go up to, it can go up right up to the finished floor elevation, but we don't want it to pass that elevation and go into your homes. That's the way the systems are designed. With respect to the smaller event storms, we're usually going to about the crown of road, and that's where we kind of utilize as a break point, saying, okay, we don't want the stage to go above and beyond that. So we want to design our systems to the 5, maybe the 10-year events. And here's a slide and you'll see it on the boards more closely, where you can see how the different storm events with their respective rainfall amounts result in additional flooding. Notice the reds in here. Now you start seeing the reds getting a little bit more expanding in area. So and as you get to the 1-year event, you have there's a lot of red, but just because there's a lot of red doesn't mean that it's necessarily going into the homes. If your home's built based off of the base flood elevation in an area, the inside of your home should be safe. It's just that the system, which is the whole island as a whole, is utilizing the areas for storage. So with that, I'd like to pass it on to Mark Kuntz.
Thank you, Cesar. Good evening, everybody. My name is Mark Kuntz. I'm a senior stormwater engineer. I work for EAC. I've been tasked with helping Mike arrive at some drainage solutions to some of the problems that you folks are experiencing here in the village. What I wanted to do is kind of go through a little bit of a summary of some of the different alternatives that emerged from some of the study that Cesar was talking about before. We've lumped the different improvements into different tiers. Tier 1 being the first level of protection that we're looking to implement. Essentially, as Cesar mentioned, that our greatest enemy is the ocean. And basically, we're working very diligently for solutions to help move stormwater off of the island and into the ocean. And clearly, in times like we've experienced the last month, which is the equinox high tide, you can see that you don't even have to worry about stormwater flooding the roadways. The ocean does a good enough job of it on its own by itself. So one of the first measures that we're investigating using, and it's used pretty widely, is the use of what they call backflow prevention devices. And what they are they're like little gates that we put on outfall pipes from the end of the stormwater systems to control the ocean water from coming in. In other words, the pressure of the stormwater, the water that comes on the roadway from the rain will actually push the water out, but it will limit the amount of ocean water coming back in. We feel that this Tier 1 approach is really the greatest solution that's going to bring the highest amount of relief for the lowest amount of money. There are currently 20 outfalls within the city and 3 additional outfalls into the Crandon Road system. There are backflow prevention devices in place there, but for the mass majority of outfalls, there aren't backflow prevention devices yet. So our first recommendation is to go ahead and construct the backflow prevention devices, which our estimated cost is about $500,000 to do so. But I am going in the right direction.
Yes.
Yeah, as you can see, as this graphic demonstrates, and for those who can't see it clearly, afterwards you can take a look at the boards. The boards are essentially a duplicate of what you're looking at on the screen, but essentially you can see the kind of relief that we anticipate you'll see in the reduction of red areas from just the installation of the backflow devices alone, without looking at any other improvements, such as upsizing pipes, increasing the number of wells, or increasing pumps. After Tier 1, that brings us to Tier 2, which is addressing the flooding areas in the lower lying areas that are located within the village. Typically, this occurs in the eastern side of the key. Holiday Colony, area number 1, basin number 11, which is an area located south of Holiday Colony, and Ocean Lane Drive, which is located, of course, to the very north of the key. I'll talk a little bit about what those particular proposed solutions are, improvements are for those areas. And Tier 3 addresses the Tier 2 essentially takes advantage of the funding that we know is available for the village right now. Tier 3 are improvements that we're going to investigate, but will likely have to be implemented as part of future funding. As I mentioned, I want to look specifically to each of the individual areas, excuse me. The first of which is Key Colony. Obviously, any stormwater solution involves ongoing maintenance. Tony spoke to you at length about the types of improvements that the village is looking at right now and actually implementing, including pipelining and the construction of additional wells. Those efforts will continue and are part of any ongoing solution. In addition to those, in this particular area, we're looking at the construction of a new submersible pump. There is an existing pump station located in this basin. It's not working efficiently, so in order to address that, we're looking at the construction of a new pump and new injection wells, because obviously you have to pump the water someplace. So additional wells will be required. We estimate the construction costs for these improvements to be at about $1.1 million. The second area I'd like to discuss is what we refer to as Area 2. Unfortunately, on the graphic, I think it says Area 3 in error in the graphic itself. Again, this is located further to the south and east of Crandon. The preventative maintenance and ongoing maintenance efforts discussed by Tony are also continue in this area. There is an existing stormwater system in this area. It's not working to capacity. So as with Area 1, we're looking at the construction of a new submersible pump and wells, but we're also looking at augmenting and improving the existing stormwater system by increasing the size of some of the pipes to help conveyance, to help move the water actually over to the pumps. The third area I'd like to discuss, of course, is located to the north. Again, also east of Crandon. As I mentioned previously, ongoing maintenance efforts will continue in this area. And the solution there is similar in that we're looking at a submersible pump and additional wells. We estimate construction cost to be about $1 million. And with that, I'd like to introduce Giorgio, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about stage monitoring and some other techniques that can be utilized to help improve quality within the village's stormwater system.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening. My name is Giorgio Tachiev, and I'm with GAT Consulting. And for this project, I provide expertise in sea level rise, groundwater, and surface and groundwater modeling and green infrastructure. So I'll be talking about these. This slide presents our suggestion, our recommendation to install ground surface and groundwater level monitoring piezometers, so that this will provide ability to know at any given point of time what is the groundwater level or the surface water level, and that will be important for future automation of the stormwater drainage system. As more pump stations are going to be implemented, it will be important to know the groundwater level and the surface water level, so that pump stations can be used in a way that will be the most efficient. The other area which I will be supporting is the green infrastructure. There are two types of stormwater systems. One is the conventional stormwater system, which is designed to take the rainfall that comes from the ground and take it as soon in the fastest way away from the developed area. This has two issues. First of all, it creates a load of stormwater downstream, and also it has an environmental impact because it takes away the water which typically infiltrates the ground and recharges the aquifer and supports the vegetation. It takes it away from the watershed or from the catchment. And green infrastructure is something that cities, in the last, let's say, 10 years, most of the cities have programs in green infrastructure, and effects are basically two: environmental and financial. As an example, I'll give you the city of New York publishes every year. They have a publication of green infrastructure impacts, and last year they reported more than $200 million of savings by implementing different green infrastructure techniques to manage stormwater on site. And for this project, we will be looking at opportunities. We will not replace the entire system with green infrastructure, but we will be looking at opportunities to implement green infrastructure elements, and they have, in addition of being environmental and financially and have a better financial performance, they also have more aesthetic kind of appearance. Like, for example, you can see, I'll just give you this is a typical rain garden. You can see the curves, and you can see the curved inlet, and this is a land depression that's below the ground. And when you have a stormwater, it's intercepted and goes through this curve into the area, and it's stored there. And this allows time to infiltrate. This is a temporary storage. Did I move back? Okay. So another typical component, it would be shown here. You have what's known as a stormwater tree. There is a void in the ground, and there is a grate on the top. And these are very small elements, but they all help store water on site and not send it downstream and to load the downstream stormwater master system. This is a typical rain garden. Again, they're landscaped typically with native plants, which are for Florida are important because they have to be able to survive for 6 months with water and without water. So these are examples that we will be looking into implementing. And the recommendations are to implement green infrastructure on all levels. From a property level, every owner can find different ways to implement green infrastructure, even cisterns of collecting water. To a neighborhood level, public green areas can be converted, if there is such opportunity, into larger rain gardens for storing water. And that will, the result of this will be environmental and financial and also aesthetic. So that's my presentation. Next is Anna.
Good evening. You've heard a lot of information tonight. You've heard about our maintenance that we perform on our system, our emergency projects, the future infrastructure plans. But none of these can be done without the most important part of the puzzle, which is the money. How are we going to fund this? I can't stress enough that everyone in the village benefits from the stormwater management program. Everyone does. That is why the single-family homes, the multi-family units, and the commercial properties all pay into the stormwater fee. If you live in Kekana, for example, and you have to go get your prescription, pick it up at CVS, you're gonna leave Kekana and you're gonna go either by Crandon or Fernwood. So you're gonna use the streets. So everyone uses them. The Stormwater Fund is an enterprise fund. It is self-financed by the stormwater fees. As you can see, our budget for next year is about $980,000, but the majority of that goes to pay for debt service. And the remainder is our operating budget for the maintenance of the system. So how are we gonna pay for this? In 2013, we refinanced our bonds. We extended the loan from 2019 all the way to 2030, and we added an extra $3.4 million for new projects. Today, we've spent approximately about $500,000, and that's been on the emergency projects that Jose had mentioned, and also on professional services. We're currently waiting for reimbursement of a grant that paid for the outfall 015. So once we get that money, we'll put that money back in the pot. Mike mentioned that, yes, there's a lot of big dollar amounts attached to what you just saw right now. And we do need more money to fund these projects. So for future funding, what we're doing right now is looking for grants. And we have been successful in the past. In the years that we've been here, we've received about $900,000 throughout the years. So we feel confident that we will be able to continue to apply for grants and hopefully be successful in receiving some of those so we can put that money back into the pot and be able to do all these projects. And for that, that is the end of my presentation, and I will hand it over to Michelle. And she's going to do the question and answer.
Thank you. At this time, we'll do question and answer. I don't know how many of you had an opportunity to get a comment sheet. You can fill this out and leave us your comments if you choose not to speak publicly. Also, you could take this with you. It does have contact information on the end or the bottom of the form. So if there's anyone who'd like to begin with a question, please feel free to stand. I think we also have a wireless mic that we can use, and we can bring that microphone to you. So if you just raise your hand or you stand, we'll take, and please give us your name and your address if you wouldn't mind, just so we can have an idea of your location.
I don't think we're going to need that.
No, you don't think you're going to need that? Okay.
So my question was related to the last graph.
for the video.
Oh. Related to the last graph, we increased the debt service to 6.5 million. Is the 3.4 million for stormwater projects only?
Yes.
And so you said we need more. Do we know how much more, or do we not know that yet?
From what we calculated right now, it looks like it's like $4 million. Like $4 million for the projects that they're proposing right now.
That we looked at this evening.
Yeah.
So pretty close.
Yeah.
The debt service of 500,000, is that 500,000 on the 6.5?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks.
I noticed that you had something related to Harbor Drive and Curtis Wood and Hampton Lane, I believe it was. I'm not quite sure. But does that also include Harbor and Sunset Drive, which is adjacent to my house? It's 600 Harbor. And for some reason, the water just seems to not flow into the drains, because the drains are higher on one side of the street than they are the other, and the drains are on the high side instead of the low side. So we also have a problem at the end of Sunset, and it floods continuously. I showed pictures that it was flooded in April, and it also flooded October, but it also floods throughout. It just seems to stay longer during the month of October and April for some reason. So I was wondering if this project included Sunset, because I noticed that Curtiswood and Harbor and Hampton Lane, I'm not sure where that is exactly in.
Yeah, what we've done is we've identified, like Caesar and Mark alluded to, we've identified the areas where the most flooding is occurring right now. You may be experiencing some flooding, but the first wave of improvements may be addressing those issues, and that's why you don't see a major infrastructure undertaking identified here. As we mentioned before, when we do implement the backflow systems, you get a significant improvement in some of the areas on the west side. What we've done is looked very closely at those areas that really have low elevations and are taking a lot of staging of water right now. The village is going through and continues to do their normal routine maintenance and repair type improvements. If there's specific locations that may have issues with the existing infrastructure, I think it's something Public Works will be willing to look at and address immediately.
If I can just comment real quick, we did receive Mrs. Young's complaint form for flooding, and we have documented some photos, and we just want to kind of wait till the next rain event to measure how well it's draining. We have a 72-hour criteria, and if the water, like in the initial rain, in 1 inch within an hour will give you a lot of water. But if it goes down within a day, then it is assumed that the drainage system is working properly. However, 2 weeks ago we had the king tides, which were the tides were higher than normal, and the water was coming back into the system. So I believe that was the reason for the continual water that was sitting, within the drains and everything. But we will be analyzing your situation, and I'll be contacting you to give you the results. Right.
And then just one last thing regarding the staging up from the king tide. We actually went and we visited we were out in the field with Jose, where we did a study looking at how the tide is affecting the existing system, and it is true there are a large number of locations where the tidal influence, that tidal water is coming back into the system and staging up on the roadways, and that's a lot of what you saw last week. Later on in the week, so that's where, by putting in the backflow prevention devices, we'll be able to stave off that situation where you didn't have any rain for a day or two, and all of a sudden you get a high tide. Well, that water can't go back into the system, and your roads stay dry, when it doesn't rain.
Well, I know my pipe on Sunset side at the end of the bay is lower, much lower. And so therefore when the water rises and recedes, it's still underwater. So that water just continuously backs up into Sunset.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the pipe that's on the bay side that flows out, the water just keeps coming in because that pipe was never replaced. That was one of the pipes that they never replaced.
Yeah, with respect to the pipe itself, if the drainage system, the vast majority of the drainage system here on the island is underwater. The pipe itself being underwater is not the issue. It's more what the elevations are on the roadway relative to the tide. Because when the water goes up on the bay side, the water in the system goes up. So it doesn't matter where this pipe is, if it's up or down, just at that elevation relative to the surface elevation. If this is lower than the water elevation, you're going to get flooding. And it doesn't matter if it rains or it doesn't rain. And it doesn't matter where that pipe is. But again, going back to the backflow prevention, that's why it's so important to have backflow prevention implemented within the village's system, because you keep that tidal water from going back up and flowing into the pipe and staging up on the roadway. So it's just that it's a concern, it's a major concern, which is that's the reason why it's part of the tier 1 solutions.
Well, they replaced most of the pipes. That's one of the pipes they did not replace, and it's still the narrow pipe. So-
One of the things that we probably should have mentioned that we didn't mention when we covered this slide is that when we ask for improvements in a certain location, even though other locations are not mentioned, there is usually a downstream impact because the areas speak to each other. You know, water moves from one location to another. So likely if you fix, what we tried to do was look for the best location to address the wider issue of staging of water throughout the entire village. We probably placed improvements in a specific location here, probably close to where you're talking about, as a measure to actually help. So even though you don't see infrastructure improvements called for in certain streets, the fact that we're doing work in other streets may play an important role in how it addresses some of the issues that you're seeing. The other thing that we didn't mention is some of the improvements called out in Tier 3 actually include collection along Harbor Drive. And I also know that one of the improvements has something to do with, your outfall is outfall number 7. And I know we've called and we've looked at that, and that's one of the outfalls we're going to be looking to address as part of the improvements that we're taking a look at.
My question is regarding what is the reason that you give special attention to the east side of the island and not to the west, when by being a resident for more than 20 years on the island, I know for sure, and I lived on the east side and now I live on the west side, and I know that our west side is much more neglected and in need of improvement than the west and the east, because we can barely navigate, let's put it this way. I have a big SUV to go through. And my friends live on the buildings, and I can pick them up easily with my SUV. In my area, I can't. So why this? Because I see, you can see, Tier 2 is all on the east. No improvements on the west. So when we see, as residents on the west, that we need much more than the east. And I know for sure that Ocean Lane Drive had extensive service on the flooding 2 or 3 years ago. Extensive. And done and completed. So now they are getting another one, improvement, and we on the west side, nothing. So I'm really upset with this. I'm sorry, but I don't see justice. I don't see fairness here. And I pay my property tax very high. We all do.
Ma'am, your question is, and your concern is valid, and one of the things we wanted to get back is feedback like this. So it is welcome feedback for us. I know that the staff is here and the manager is here. We'll definitely look at prioritizing some of the improvements that we've actually earmarked now. The major reason why we moved at the east side first was we have a budget to follow, and the best way to max out the budget and get the best bang in terms of value to bring in improvements was to try and fix an area within the village. There's a board that we have that actually focuses on the west of Crandon, and it's the last board right over there. There is a concern. We've seen and we've identified it, and I know that as funding, what you need to do the west side is actually a lot of money in terms of dollars, and no point in going and trying to half fix a situation, because I don't think it will bring the right value to the residents in that area. But I know that your concern is a good one, and I'm sure that Jose is here. It's something that we can take a look at and see how we can reassess some of how we're reprioritizing some of the improvements.
I'm sorry, but it's not enough for me,
I want to
as a
clarify.
resident. And I've been suffering this for years. I live on Islandale and West Heather, which is the worst area that you can imagine,
Yeah.
okay? I can barely leave my house. I have a granddaughter living with me, so if I have an emergency, I cannot leave my house. I need like an helicopter.
May I explain some things? All the emergency work that has been done on the west side. You know, the school is on the west side, the
It still
outfalls.
floods a lot, Jose.
No,
The other
no, no.
day, I couldn't barely pass
No,
the area.
it's not, things are, what I'm saying, we have already done the emergency work on the west side. We have fixed 2 outfalls that collapsed and replaced them with a new outfall, and that helps mainly the West Heather area that it's very bad, and I agree with you. The other thing is, even though the way this is presented, it doesn't show, most of the outfalls, not most, all the outfalls are on the west side, and the backflow preventers are going to be placed in all those outfalls. So there's some outfalls, some connections on the east side that are going to get backflow preventers, but I think it's 3. The other 20 or 17 is on the west side. I'm not saying that that's going to solve everything, but certainly it will, I hope it will help a lot on the king tide situation where right now you don't have to have it rain to get flooded or whatever, water, whatever you want to call it, above the grades of, and in some places in the street, like in West Heather, 300 West Heather, the water goes from one side of the street to the other. It's
a river.
without rain.
Yeah.
If it rains,
Saturday was example.
yeah, if it rains, has no place to
And
go
it's in
but up.
10 minutes, because I left in the morning to walk. When I came back, I couldn't go in to my house. I had to go all the way
Yeah.
to the other side,
So what I'm saying is,
without any drop of rain.
some of the concerns are there. We are closely monitoring that. And the work that is being proposed on backflow preventers hopefully will improve a lot of these situations. And we'll have to check it and monitor and find out how it works, but that's the intent. There is not a favorite thing from one side to the other. The model is a mathematical model, and you know, it's just they're trying to address the lower sides, the lower areas.
I have another proposal in our specific situation, because I noticed as a resident for 20 years, for the last 20 years of the same area, for instance, since they built 2 bumps, one on Warren Lane, another one close to Harbor Drive, it forms a well, a natural well on the road on West Heather. So I would like for you to think about to change the design of the bumps, okay, to do more like friendly, nature-friendly bumps, not those big bumps that just the water stays there, doesn't go anywhere. Okay, I don't know if you noticed this, and this is a very simple and very cost-effective, and I don't think it's that expensive to do immediately.
Yeah. Well, that's something that we have to evaluate, and that's more part of the public works road work. Also, the issue that were presented here about the green type of systems. It's something that we have to look in details. So it might be that swales in some area could be improved, and things like that may be able to help in the process. one reality is, as Mariana said, we live in a low level, and we're higher than Miami Beach, but only maybe 6 inches. And, and the tide is going up, the sea level is rising. So we will have to have a continuous adaptation process to minimize the impact. We're not going to eliminate it, but try to minimize it.
Your concern with the speed bumps is something that we're very familiar with. Anytime we go in and start to implement improvements in terms of infrastructure, we also look at things that may be creating stagnant points along the corridors. And if those speed bumps are actually doing that, there will be a clear choice for elimination. Now, I know the speed bumps are there as a traffic calming device or system. They could be replaced by other conventional systems that won't create a stagnant situation where stormwater just stays and doesn't move because of them. So once improvements are looked at, we look at the big picture, we look at the subsurface in terms of the drainage infrastructure, but we also look at the surface to make sure that there are no other things in place that would adversely impact on the improvements that we're specifying.
Do you have any other questions or comments for this evening? Well, we'll be here until the conclusion of the workshop, which is 8 p.m. So if you have any other views you'd like to take a look at, you're welcome to. If not, thank you so much for your presence, your time. Again, comment sheets will be out front. If you did not sign the sign-in sheet, please leave us your name, email address, especially your email address, so we can add you to our database if this is your first time visiting us. Okay? Thank you so much, and have a great evening.